Well, I think you hit on the key, which is transparency.
Is crazy to me. I mean, $300 million, they still went $12 million in debt.
As far as the data center is concerned, I am all for the data center.
I am a man of faith. I mean, our family, like most families, we've had personal tragedies, family tragedies.
People really don't understand that conservative values, Republicans, we're the only reason why the country, states, counties, cities still have any freedoms at all. You have to believe in a higher power, because if you don't, then state becomes more important, and you will, guaranteed 100%, you will lose your freedoms.
Great point.
Because government will take it from you. All right, welcome out to God and Country. I'm Uriah Kennedy, and this is Ingrid Bettridge. We got a trifecta of guests with us this week, coming from the Davis County Commissioner's race. Hopefully, prayerfully, and with everybody's support out there, these are going to be the three that are going to be in office here come after the primary here at the end of June. June 23rd is the primary, so make sure you get out there and vote for these three. We've got with us Scott Fletcher, we got Susan Lee, and then we got the main man himself, who's already in office, that we helped get into office a couple years ago, John Croft, there at the end. And so this is a group that we want in office. Look for this coming Friday, the 22nd, Friday the 22nd, or out at the Morgan County building. So all of you who would like to come out to Morgan County building, we're going to have Phil Lyman, we're going to have Tiara Auxier, and we're going to have Braden Hess come and speak again at the Morgan County building.
Tina Cannon?
And Tina Cannon's going to also be there. So, yeah, look for those four next week. If you live on the east bench there in Stuart Adams District, Braden Hess District, feel free to drive on out to Morgan. Anybody within Phil Lyman's area, feel free to drive up to Morgan and see him speak, along with, again, Tiara Auxier and Braden Hess. So this coming Friday, what time this comes out, this coming Friday, 6:30 p.m. at Morgan County building. Funny thing about that is we put out some really, really nice posters out there to kind of give an announcement about the event. And we put one out there in Mountain Green, we put one out in Peterson, and then a nice one here in Morgan. And the Morgan one didn't last 30 minutes before someone stole it.
In Morgan.
It stole it. So your fellow compatriots out there's someone out there who's pretty liberal at stealing stuff out there. And we checked with Morgan City and Morgan County, and they had never touched it. But so, yeah, our really nice banner got kited just like that. Someone's not really wanting to support one of those three. I imagine it's Phil, but we want to get Phil in there. We don't want Celeste Moore in there, just like we don't want Moore in there. We want Carrie Ann Lisenby in. So make sure you get out there and support us. And also those of you who are in Davis County, we want to make sure we're supporting Trevor Lee.
Yes, I have cameras on my big Trevor Lee sign in my yard because Bob's people are going around and spray painting it.
Yeah, I can see that. Yep. So let's get into it. We've got a lot to get into today because we've got two other individuals that are running for this office. One that's Bob Stevenson is currently running against Trevor, who's got a abysmal track record as commissioner. We've got Lorraine, who's got Lorraine, even worse track record. And we've got John Croft in here to kind of let us know the truth about what is happening at the commissioner's office so that the truth has to come out. I mean, if you're not educated as a voter, you're not going to know how to vote. So a lot of the things that happen behind the scenes, that happen in the office there, are not readily known or available, and we want to get all that information out. So let's start off with Scott here. What caused you to run for this office, and what do you think should be happening right now in the county commissioner's office that's currently not happening?
Well, thanks for doing this. First off, we appreciate the time you have. Before I get into that, make sure everybody understands that there's the 2 commission seats that are available, A and B. So Susan and I are running for separate seats as we go forward. So I'm running for A, and Susan's running for B. I just want to make sure that that's very clear. So to answer your question of why I'm running, there are a number of reasons. First off, I'm a long-term resident of Davis County, 66 years in fact. All 4 of my children and 11 of my grandchildren all live in Davis County, so I have a vested interest in what's going on here. So I spent the first 42, 43 years of my career making sure my family was taken care of. And now I have time to go jump into public service, and I've always had a desire to do that, so that's key. So, and my family runs deep in Centerville and Bountiful. In fact, before I-15 was there, as a kid, I used to camp where I-15 is, and so I have a deep history there. In fact, some of the parks are named after my great-grandfather there, so it's a deep commitment there. So, so the primary reason why, other than I have a deep interest in here and I want to represent the citizens, is the biggest issue with the tax thing. Right, so I'm sure we're going to get into that here as we go into it.
Well, that exploded down in Salt Lake County and kind of toned it down up here in Davis County, which was a good thing. So.
Right. So I was frustrated by that. When we went to the Truth and Taxation, you saw a number of older gentlemen that were in tears, quite frankly, and saying, here's the tax that you put me in now, and this is what my Social Security is, and now you just basically taxed me out of my home. And that frustrated me. That wasn't compassionate at all, and so we need to do better. Second reason why is that is transparency. So my position is we are here to represent the citizens of Davis County. It's your money. It's not the commissioner's money, and we're not transparent in the current commission in terms of what's being done. I mean, there's a big issue now in Box Elder County about the data center, right? Well, the problem is they weren't transparent. So there's processes that I have in place that I can put in place to help this be more transparent. John and I have talked a lot about a newsletter. We've talked about changing the times that we're going to do the commission meetings.
I love the changing the time. You know, as somebody who works 10-hour days, I can't always participate in things that happen during the day.
Well, our biggest challenge that we have, quite frankly, and this is another reason why, is apathy. And we have to overcome apathy. So there's a number of processes that we can put in place to get there.
Utahns like sugar, so that's something you could use to lure them to meetings. I found that to be true.
Yeah, those sodas with lots of sugar in them, right? So those are some of the. I've got other reasons why I think that we need to make decisions based on honest data and honest dialogue between the people in Davis County, and so. And when you don't have good data, you make poor decisions. And so that's one of the things you'll see that I'm very big in. And I'm going to use my 42 years experience in being an executive and also as a physicist and building rocket motors and having to do trade study analysis and running large corporations and so forth. So
yeah, one of the big things that's bothered me is your predecessor. I just feel like the deals are made to enrich friends and people, you know, I know people in my neighborhood who are big business people and own things. That's who they want because it particularly enriches them, which isn't what it should be. It should be who helps Davis County and who doesn't look as a taxpayer as a piggy bank.
Well, exactly. And so one of the things to preclude that from happening is I've taken no money from any special interest. And so I would encourage people to go look at all the candidates and see where their money's coming from, which will drive, in my opinion, the way they're going to vote. So my objective, once again, the primary reason is because I think that the citizens of Davis County have got to be represented. They have to be represented fairly, and I think that I can do that. In fact, I know I can do that.
Now, your nickname is the data guy.
Right.
Tell us why that is.
Well, because in business, if I don't make good decisions based on good data, then there's a number of things that happen. First off, you make a bad technical decision, which has huge financial impacts. That's one. As an executive, I've had to work with attorneys. I've had to negotiate contracts. I work with accountants. I got to balance a budget. And so unlike, and you'll hear this a lot, but unlike city government or county government, what happens if they overspend the budget? What do? They come back and they ask the taxpayer for more money.
Dip in the piggy bank.
As a business guy, if I do that, the CEO says, well, see the door, see you later, right? So there's got to be discipline. And when we lack that discipline, in fact, Scott Park went to the commissioners and said, you guys are overspending, stop. They didn't. They overspent by $12 million. Well, that's got to stop. Excuse me. So those are fundamental things. So the data tells the story. In fact, I've got in front of me here the 2024. The 2025 hasn't been released yet, but this is the annual comprehensive financial report, which you can tell by all these tabs. I've gone through implicitly and kind of derived on what some of the things are, and we can talk about those later. But that's, those are fundamental reasons why. And if you just boil it down to one thing, is I think the citizens of Davis County need to be represented, and decisions should not be made behind closed doors.
Susan, let's go to you. Kind of lean into that mic and introduce yourself and why you're running and
You bet.
what got you to make that decision.
Well, thank you. I also decided to run. I got that notice 30% tax increase that came. And right there, my background is accounting. I got my degree in accounting. And so when you see a tax increase that's that big of a jump all at once, that's a red flag. And so I was like, what's going on? Because honestly, I had no intentions of running for county commissioner at that point. But that was a wake-up call. So when I started digging in and finding out, the more I found out, I thought, you know what? The county has a spending problem. And just to go back a little bit about me, I'm from Davis County. I've lived here for over 60 years, and all my family lives here. And something that I like to share with everybody is my parents live in Davis County. They are 90 years old, and my dad was a school teacher. My mom was a homemaker. And for 30 years, they worked, they saved, they made sure that their mortgage was paid off when he retired, so that they could live comfortably through retirement. Well, right now, they pay almost 3 times more in property taxes than what their mortgage payment was. That, to me, is just, it's a big problem.
That's not right.
It's not right. And so I was talking to my dad, and it was at the beginning of this year, and he said, we're going to have to cut our dish network because it's just too expensive. And I immediately said, no, don't do that. I'll pay for it. And my dad's from the era where, oh, no, you're not. We'll make it work. And they're 90 years old. That's one of their main forms of entertainment. And to hear that they were willing to make the hard cut, and yet the county, they were unwilling to make hard cuts, was really concerning to me. And I thought, if you look at the segment of Davis County, the fastest growing segment is 60 years and older. We have a segment of the population we need to start looking at as what can we do to better take care of them. And I felt like after seeing how many of that segment of the population went in with their property tax forms saying, we can't afford this. Look at this. This is my mortgage. This is how much property taxes are. We can't afford this increase. It's just too much. It's too much of a burden.
How could they not care? I don't get it.
It was the craziest thing. And so their way of looking at it and caring was, okay, we won't do 30%. We'll do half that. And that's what they passed, with the exception of Commissioner Crofts. He was the one that said no. And so when I started digging into it to find out what was going on in the county, I soon found out they needed the 30% tax increase. It was a $12 million debt of overspending they had done in the county. And when they didn't take the 30% tax increase and only half that, they still had $6 million of debt that they had to decide, how are we going to take care of this? Now, when, somebody that's looking at this and thinking, okay, what is the problem? Well, I can, without any doubt, say is spending. They have a spending problem. And then
Now, at a debate that we moderated, Lorene, whose seat you are running for, she made it sound like to the voters or the delegates, well, we have to, by law, we have to fund public services. And that was her answer to it, to make it look like, well, we had to fund fire, police, and that's why this tax increase.
Yeah. First and foremost, we have to take care of the services in Davis County, without a doubt. But that's not what caused that $12 million overage. It was careless spending. They had taken $90 million between the CARE Act from the Biden administration and then the COVID money. It was about a total of $90 million one-time spending that they could do. And they took that and they overspent still. $90 million, and they still overspent.
What did they do with it?
Well, they built the Emergency Operations Center, which they said is, and I'm sure there's a need for that. And that was a one-time spending. But then there were other things that they did, like hire employees permanently. And when you hire employees permanently, that's not a one-time spending problem. That goes on, and that's continuous. So what I'm finding more and more and more is that the current commissioners, with the exception of Commissioner Crofts, have created long-term problems that future commissioners are going to have to deal with. And one thing that's really nice is I'm willing to deal with it and take care of it. I know that Scott Fletcher is willing to deal with it and take care of it. But we need to get that spending pulled back under control. We need to look at the county as a whole. We need to say, okay, where can we make those cuts? We're going to have to deal with it. And where do we need to make sure those services are not lessened by what we do? We need to make sure we keep up on what is required. And so, it is something that we have to take care of.
So do you mind if I just jump in here just real quick? So we've unfortunately built a culture that is not based in looking at what the long-term costs are. So we have not strategically thought about what the recurring costs are. So, for example, ramp funding, we can talk about that, right? Comes from restaurants and from, people talk about that being from out-of-town folks. Well, the facts is only less than 25% comes from out of town. Okay. So the majority of that money actually comes from people within Davis County. So you're taxing people for that ramp funding, which can be used for four things, but it can't be used for recurring costs. That's specifically stated in the ramp funding. You cannot use that for ongoing expenses. So where is that money coming from? So we talk about this whole strategic approach that when we make decisions based on this is a thing we want, but nobody looks strategically and says into the future. It's like me coming to you and saying, I'm going to give you a bonus for $20,000. And then me saying, and then you have to make a decision. Are you going to buy another 3/4 ton truck for $110,000? You're going to put away for your kid's education. Well, if you buy the 3/4 ton truck, you're going to have a $500 or $600 or $700 or $800 payment every month that goes forward. Well, that's exactly what we've done in our community, which is just crazy. And so people are not thinking strategically. And so we need to think strategically about how these things done. So there's processes, right? Schedule, cost, performance, risk. You got to look at quality of life. There's stuff called earned value management where you manage the budgets. You got to negotiate contracts correctly. You have to deal with legal issues. Well, so just my experience, I've done that for 42 years. In fact, I only did it here, but I also spent 11 years in Washington, D.C. doing very similar things, building coalitions. So that's one thing that we need to do is build coalitions. When we've talked to the people at the state level, there's very few people. Our two commissioners never went to the, at least to their experience, when I went and talked to our representatives in the Senate and the House, they told me that they had never come to the House to work these things out. So we need to build coalitions to go fight back against unfunded mandates, for example. So not only do we need to build it within the cities of Davis County, but we need to reach out to Box Elder and Cache County and Juab County. There's power in numbers. If you go to the House, to the state capitol, and try to fight a battle by yourself, you'll lose. You have to build coalitions. I know how to do that. I did that for years and years and years. And we need to build those coalitions to fight back against these unfunded mandates that come forward.
Well, honestly, my opinion is I think it's worse than that. And I mean, you're saying that people don't think strategically. I think they are thinking strategically, and they think, well, it's going to get taken care of. If we put this in the budget now, if we just kind of pay for it, then we're going to force the future to just kind of cover those expenses. There's going to be increased revenue. The economy is going up. We're going to have an increased tax base, and they think it's just going to either take care of itself or it's going to force people to take care of it, right? I think people are actually knowing what they're doing when they make those type of decisions. We see in the federal government, not so much the state government, because the state's been pretty good, but we obviously saw it in the other two commissioners, where they see something and they says, well, we want that, we need that, right? And let's figure out a way to pay for it. And then they look at the overall county budget, right? And what is the total budget for the county?
Yeah, so $90 million a year comes from just property taxes. And then from the $90 million up to $300 million, there's actually pass-through taxes, which would be from your federal, your state, your sales
So they have
tax.
a $300 million budget.
Yes, yes.
So they're looking at $300 million, and they look at these, well, this only costs $1 million, that only costs $2 million.
Sorry-eyed.
And the numbers just, they just get lost in the numbers. And the feds have a massive problem with that, where they're handling a multi-trillion-dollar budget, and that's pocket change at this point, right? And then we can squeeze it in there. We can figure it out. Well, we'll just pay for it now and figure it out later, right? And it's not necessarily not strategically thinking. It's purposely deciding, making a decision that I'm either going to force the future to take care of it or...
Well, the challenge with that, quite frankly, is transparency.
Yeah.
They're not transparent, so they make decisions behind closed doors. And what the outcome is of all that, what you just talked about, is you pay for it. It's the citizens.
I think
and
that's exactly it. They're doing it behind closed doors,
Yep.
and they're purposely... I know this is not financially sound, but we're going to force it through anyway, make this decision for the public, and force them to pay for it, because once it's in there, it's in there. Well, you can't say no after it's done, right? We got to pay for it now, right?
Yeah, and something that needs to be really clear is there isn't a tax that they don't love. And what I mean by that is there are taxes that are fees, because they're both taxes to me, but there are instances where, like, they charged $10 a car when they were building the West Davis corridor. Well, it's finished. They didn't need to keep charging us $10 per car per family. And so it could have been gone. They could have
Pulled
taken
it back.
and stopped it. But instead, Commissioner Stevenson ran down to the legislature and said, and tucked in a bill that said, okay, let us keep that on and let's use it to build a parking structure. So they don't want to get rid of it. They want to continue spending it. And to me, that is not taking care of the people.
It's not ethical.
It's not.
It's not ethical at all. And we see that all the time, is where in the state government's notorious for that, where they pass some kind of a funding, put some funding in place, and then they never pull it back.
Well, not only that, but, to continue these taxes and to use it as such a way as, you know what, we're just going to keep spending, and that it's not enough is crazy to me. I mean, $300 million, they still went $12 million in debt. I mean, that is a spending problem.
What business would survive like that if I came out and I can't spend?
Yeah, absolutely none.
None.
There's none.
I hope they're not running their
There's
household
none.
budget that way.
Any business or even any home, you'd be under collection agencies, you'd be in courtrooms, but yet government gets a pass because it's government.
And I think it's very important you understand the way that I think, and I'm sure, these two can also say what, how they, but when I served on the Kaysville City Council for 4 years. And during that time, I asked to be over the Power Commission. Now, the Power Commission, over the Power Company. The power company that Kaysville is a part of is a co-op called UAMPS. And there's several cities throughout Utah, a couple up in Idaho. They're all part of this co-op where we buy our electricity. And when I went to the first training with UAMPS, they were able to tell me that Kaysville was bringing the whole group down because they had less than $1 million in reserves and were supposed to have $5 million in reserves. And so I went back to the mayor and the council, and I said, okay, we've got a problem. The east side of Kaysville, we know, is falling apart. There are power poles rotting. We had a few of them fall over in people's yards. A light wind blows, and they get brownouts. A stronger wind blows, we get blackouts. The transformers catch on fire because they're not updated. So we had a lot of problems with the electrical company. And now finding out we don't have anything in reserves, really, that we're supposed to have. So I asked, can we form a power commission? So we formed a power commission. We looked at everything. We were able to figure out that the money in reserves had been used to buy land by a city manager. So we were able to sell that land, put the money back. With the power commission, we were able to get a structure set up so that we could repair the east side of Kaysville. And we did it all without raising rates. I never, ever look at the government as the way to solutions. It never should be that way. You shouldn't look at how, with your hand out saying, how can you give me more because I want to spend more? It should be the opposite because honestly, we are being nickeled and dimed to death with all the taxes we have to pay, whether it's our property taxes, the sales taxes. I mean, there's special sales taxes. Even if you buy a car in Davis County, we have to pay more because it's a special sales tax on buying an automobile. And the sales taxes that we have or the fees that we have is just beyond a line that should never have been crossed. And it's a burden on the backs of so many people that live in Davis County. And so we need to start doing a better job. And we need to look at, what? It's not government that's the solution. We can find a solution without raising rates.
I think it's amazing that you were able to figure out how to get the land sold without a complete uprising.
Yeah.
Because, if the government actually would do stuff like that, we'd save a lot of money. But good on you to be able to figure out how to convince them to sell the land and not do whatever they were planning on doing with the land. Let's get down to John here. So, John, you've been in this for a couple of years now.
Yeah, 1 year, 5 months now.
1 year, 5 months that you've been in there now. And the public really needs an honest, straightforward picture of what's going on in the commissioner's office, information that's not getting out there. So what are things that have hit your desk that's coming across that you're adamantly against that the other two keep voting against you on?
So I will say this, when we vote probably 95% in agreement. And a lot of our commission meetings require, contract items and issues that are pretty non-controversial. And, that said, we as a board of commissioners, this 3-commission form of government, it's been around for 170 plus years. So it's a very effective form of government. We serve as the legislative and the executive, so kind of the Congress and the president, if you could put it in a local level perspective. But, when I came in, I had a lot of challenges, and I, bringing it back to Scott and Susan, who I both strongly endorse. I told all the candidates that were running, you're welcome to come and talk to me. And, it was a little bit of a learning curve for me. I committed to having a town hall every quarter. And I held those in the meetings where, I would talk about a certain subject in that and invite people to come in, shake my hand, talk to me, give me their concerns. But, I have to say that Scott and Susan came to me and asked me questions, detailed questions. And it wasn't just those questions that made me a better commissioner. I had to dig into things and understand things better so that I could help them understand. So as candidates, I think that it's pretty important to, when we go back to our caucus system, and I talk to the delegates, we've had a lot of criticisms from delegates, or a lot of people have criticized the delegates. I will never criticize the delegates. They made me a better candidate and a better person, and they also educated me and taught me on some important things that I needed to know. And I think that what I really like about Susan and Scott both is that they've demonstrated that humility to learn, not just from the public, but from other people as well, and me, and they've come and talked to me repeatedly. And, so I have to say, I think that this 3-commission form of government is the most effective and best form of government for a county. And we've had other counties that have experimented with council form of governments, and they've had struggles and challenges. We had one county that, they changed to a council or a mayor form of government, and their taxes literally doubled the next few years. And so, with a 3-commission form of government,
we all know which county that one is.
That was
Salt Lake County. Yeah.
But John, is it a 3-commissioner form of government when I find out that there's 2 commissioners making certain decisions behind closed doors?
Yeah. So we do have the open meetings in the state of Utah. So ideally, we're not supposed to have that. Ideally, the Board of Commissions, we're a board. The 3 of us should be making decisions collectively. Even there's the executive portion of it, where you're dealing with all the little issues in the county and whatnot. And we're supposed to communicate and work together and, work together as a board on those decisions. And we should all know, we have different portfolios. We have the county assignments divided up into 3. But, ideally, we would be communicating with each other, what we do. And then we have the legislative portion. And the legislative portion, that's where we create ordinances. And that's really kind of a small portion of of everything that we pass. But, those are pretty important things. And then we have our budget. The budget is, kind of controversial sometimes. I have to say, I really dug into it. I had a delegate that told me, he said, in Title 17, that's the portion of the Utah State Code that regulates a big portion of county governance. And I read through that. That thing is as thick as the Bible and a lot more boring, but I got through it and read it. And I had a really wise delegate that told me, just because you've read Title 17 doesn't mean that you're a subject matter expert on county governance. And that was true, because there's so much that goes on with the county that is not in Title 17. And that's why I reached out to all the candidates and wanted to educate them and let them know my perspective as a new commissioner, what they needed to know. And Susan and Scott both leaned forward and asked really good questions and difficult questions too. So, when we go back to that, I think that's really important. And, Scott and Susan both talked about transparency. I'm committed to transparency. That's why I hold town halls every quarter. I usually have a subject that I'm discussing, and you held an event and you were asking questions. And one of the questions that you asked, to some people is, would you do anything differently than what you did, after, being an elected official? And I was kind of surprised at a couple of the comments. A couple of people said, well, I don't think I'd change anything. But I have to say, after me being in for a year and 5 months, I think I would change a few things. I think I've been critical of a couple of people that I probably should not have been critical of. We had one county official that was ringing the alarm bells on the budget. And it wasn't just 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. It went back 5-6 years where they were ringing the alarm bell that, we're coming up on a crisis, a financial crisis in 2026. Let's consider, lowering spending or raising taxes. We have to do something. And a lot of counties do have to raise taxes incrementally, maybe a 3% tax increase here and there, or maybe look at ways to leverage, efficiencies in that. And so I was, in 2008, when we had the big financial crisis, I worked for the state of Utah. I worked in emergency management, and I worked for the Department of Public Safety, and they had a commitment not to lay people off, which I agree with. I think it's hard to lay people off, and, especially during that financial crisis. But what they did was they put a hiring freeze on. And so we didn't hire new people, but we didn't lay anybody off. And so what we did is we leveraged everything. We became leaner and more effective. And we didn't cut services, but we all worked a lot harder. And I think that there were things like that, we could probably leverage some of those lessons from the Great Recession. And we don't have to make bad decisions. We don't have to increase spending all the time. We can make smart, strategic decisions that leave us more effective in the future. So I think that there's a lot of things. One of the comments that was made at the same event that you were holding, people were asking, they were asked the question, well, what do we do, if the state requires us to do something? You can't lower taxes, you can't cut spending. Well, there's always a way to leverage it. So, with this tax increase, we did need a 30% tax increase to go the direction that we were going. They raised the taxes 15%. I voted no on that. And I'll have to say that was a very difficult few months for me because, you have the inclination, you want to get along with your coworkers, your fellow commissioners, you want to get along with the staff, you want to get along with the departments. But we had people that were literally calling me, emailing me, begging not to raise taxes. And, it's a really difficult spot to be put in. So Bob and Lorraine did raise taxes 15%, 14.9%. And then it still gave us a $6 million deficit. And so what do we do with that $6 million deficit? There were comments made that we can't make up those differences. That can't be made up. But we've been doing some improvements and some very strategic improvements that have saved the county money and saved the taxpayer money. So will we have a balanced budget? I certainly hope so. I believe that we're approaching that. But, when you say, I don't believe in that fatalistic approach that the state requires us to do this, and so we're going to pass all the costs back onto the taxpayer. We've proven that that's not true. We've proven that we can be leaner and more effective and still offer high services. Davis County really does have some of the best county employees in the state. We have people that are excellent, and it's nice to see that, people are pulling together at the county to make some of those improvements. And I just have to, give kudos to Susan and Scott because they're leaning forward. They're looking at this with a strategic vision for making things better. And I do believe that the county is going in generally the right direction, but I think that we can even improve that and go even in a much, much better direction. And I'm looking forward to both of them being elected. And I really hope and pray that the voters see the wisdom and the vision of these two candidates. I'll be voting for both of them.
Thanks, John.
we hope so. We hope everybody gets on board with that. So kind of walk through, how did that occur? What caused that to happen? And we can discuss what we could do in the future to fix that. So you had a $300 million budget over there.
Yep.
What was spent that caused that to run over? Was there increased services, increased employees? I mean, what?
Well, I think that Susan and Scott correctly identified some of the issues with that. We had temporary stimulus money that was provided to us by the federal government. And so, that temporary stimulus money fell off the cliff in 2026. And so, we had very wise people that were ringing the alarm bells and saying, look, we've got to decrease our spending.
Well, what was
raise
spent on it?
taxes.
Because
And
it's
we
one
were
time.
kick- we
It's a
were
one-time
kicking the
money.
can down. Yeah, we were kicking the
Yes.
can down the road a little bit, and we weren't raising taxes, and we kept spending, and our spending kept going up.
What
So,
was you spending on though? I mean, people want to know.
a variety of things, just like,
So that emergency service building, how much did that cost?
yeah. So so I come from an emergency management background. So I worked as a natural hazards specialist. I was the National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator, Risk Map Coordinator, Statewide Programs, and Earthquake Program Manager for the state of Utah. So I worked with the counties and the cities and that. So I feel a little hesitant criticizing that facility, but I do have to say it's a great facility. But
Could it have been built cheaper? Who got the contract? Were they friends of certain commissioners? And I'm not accusing, I'm asking. I want to know.
I'm not really prepared to respond to all those questions on that. But I will say that, when we build a building, the costs don't just end there. When we build a building, we're then responsible for providing maintenance to the building, heating, air conditioning, maintenance. So, when that building was built with federal funds, which offers a lot of benefits. So if we were to have a large earthquake, say a magnitude 7.2 earthquake in Davis County, that Emergency Operations Center would be the nerve center for the response and recovery, and it would offer a lot of benefits to the county.
So we just didn't have anything before that?
Yeah, before that, and a lot of counties the size of Davis County, they don't have a building specifically like an Emergency Operations Center, but they'll use like the sheriff's office. They'll move other people out of, their office space, and they'll, use other office space as an emergency operations center. So emergency operations centers on the local level are meant to be flexible. And, so you could even do an emergency operations center in a fairgrounds or a big building. You'd have to bring
So it's not in that
equipment.
county building.
Right. So it's not it's there on the north side of the Western Sports Park, on the south end of Station Park. And it's a great facility. I think that we're going to be able to utilize that facility for a lot of things. We actually have one of the best emergency managers in the entire state. We were able to hire her from the state of Utah. And when I worked at emergency management, she was one of the people they stole away. And I was not very forgiving of Davis County for taking her. But then when I got elected, I forgave the county for hiring her. But she really is an excellent employee. And if we had a disaster, I think Davis County, a large-scale disaster, or even a medium one, we would be more prepared than most counties. But I will say there are added costs that come with more buildings. So, we have, it's not just that building. We have another building. We have the animal care facility. Used to be animal control.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
We're going into, we're going out to bid. I believe they'll probably break ground on that maybe in August. I think that we've got some things to go through first. But, that's a capital expense. So that's an expense that's going to be an expensive building.
Well, can I make a comment on that? I'm glad you brought that up because John, with his specialty, he is a specialist on earthquakes in Davis or in the state of Utah. In fact, one of the foremost experts in earthquake, where the fault lines run. His knowledge base is so incredible. And he looked at where they're building the new animal care facility, and it was an alarm to him because it's sitting so close to the fault line, and he wanted to put a pause on building it so that we could look at that and say, is it worth putting, right now it's $16 million they've allocated.
Yep.
$16.5 million they've allocated to build this new animal care facility. He said, can we just put a pause on it and make sure we're not making a mistake because of where this is being built, and it's so close to the fault line. And the other two commissioners said, no, it's going on. But the reason I want to talk about this animal care facility, currently we have a facility, and the new one's going to be at least 3 times larger. And people
Do we need that?
people are wondering, why is it 3 times larger? Well, we used to be animal control. And animal control is where if you have animals and you have them for too long, then they would have to put the animals down because, nobody wants them. That's how they would deal with it. Now the new animal care facility, with which they have changed, the previous commissioners did that, it requires the county not to put animals down, and instead they house them for however long they live, and if they're not adopted. So we've become animal welfare. And so when John talks about...
Sounds absolutely miserable for an animal
So
to sit there and
when
live in a
John
kennel
talks-
for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
That's not compassionate.
So when he talks about long-term expenditures, well, now it's 3 times longer. We have a lot more animals that are going to have to be taken care of. They want to hire a full-time veterinarian. They also have to hire how much staff to keep the kennels clean, how much food to feed all those animals, and it is just exploded. And also the $16.5 million they've allocated to build that building, it was, the bid said we need 22 million, was it 20?
There's some estimates.
Yeah.
I think 20, 22 million.
So there's a belief that the amount that was allocated to build that building anyway is too low. And so if we keep going down this road, is it going to be a lot of change orders because it's going to cost a lot more? Probably. And so...
And is that veterinarian's purpose to only care for those animals, or can I now take my dog there to go get neutered?
I believe that would be a service that would be offered.
So if I'm a veterinarian in that local area, I'm not thinking that's real great to have government competing.
You're exactly right. And that's one of the issues. So both Susan and John have outlined very nicely you asked the question of where's all this money going to? And I think the answer is I've dug into the details here, is it's gone a lot of places. There's not just one place, it's many places. It's the Western Sports Park at operating costs of $8 million a year. It's the animal care facility. It's probably, I don't have exact numbers, but probably between $2 and $3 million a
Is
year.
that Western Sports Arena supposed to be profitable?
Yes, it should be. I mean, it should be we should break even at least on it, because in the end, who has to pay for that? The taxpayer.
I asked because
so-
the Davis,
Currently is
the
not.
Davis
So it
Conference
is
Center
not.
isn't
It's
meant to
not.
be
So it
profitable.
loses $1 million a year. There's
No, the conference.
the conference, and that's what she asked. So the conference center is $1 million a year, and the Western Sports Park is an $8 million a year budget. And they say they're going to meet it up to $4 million, but it still leaves it $4 million in the rears. And so we got a problem. We're also spending, there's the USU facility, right? That the county provided the property. They built the building, and we pay them $350,000 a year to operate the building. And at the end of 10 years, guess what? We give a whole facility to USU. So we gave it to them. We're paying it for them, and then we're going to give it to them at the end of the deal. So you're exactly right. We don't get it. So the question was, where's it at? And the answer is it's across multiple fronts. So we've gotten hit as a taxpayer. We got multiple cuts, and so I use the analogy of, we got to sew each those cuts one at a time. And so how do you do that? Is the question. How do you come to a solution? And the answer is you got to dig into the details. You got to know where you're at first off, and then you got to come up with solutions in order to provide the best services to the public for what they need. And it's not about wants, it's about needs. We got to ask the question first, what is our needs versus our wants? And then from there, if it's a need, then we need to address how do you strategically go about providing that need? And we're not doing that today. We're driven, I think, by a lot of special interest. You made the point earlier about that. And so I think that's a lot of what's being driven, and the transparency is simply not there. So how do you go about doing that, right? There's a number of processes to do that, right? So and that's where I'm going to bring a lot of my expertise. So when you make a decision on a rocket motor that has this billions of dollars, or you have a budget that's billions of dollars, you have to do what's called a business case analysis: schedule, cost, performance, risk, do earned value management. Susan talked about accounting principles. We got and furthermore, we got to look at, because there's some issues in county that are quality of life issues, right? So example, the Davis Park golf course, right? There's many that have come and said, we want to get rid of that and put high density housing there. I'm adamantly against that. I support the citizens of Fruit Heights saying, let's keep that. It's making somewhere between, all three of us believe the same thing, but it's making money.
Conversation for me to have, because again, then I start worrying, are you competing with the golf course I live on,
Yeah, right. So, but I mean, but it is making money. It does make money. Both of the courses that are county courses make money. So they're offering a return on investment. So you got to look at those as issues. So you got to dig into the details. The question is, who has the experience and the expertise, and most importantly, the tenacity to dig into these issues and then make them available to the public and bring public in what I call citizen committees to help us make decisions. You made the point earlier, and John did too, is that are we the experts in every single facet of the commission? The answer is absolutely not. But we're smart enough to know that we need to bring in experts to be able to talk to the people. First off, these citizen committees, which is across the county, bring them in and have them help us. I mean, let's talk about running business. Plumbers do a great job of running their business. They have to be profitable, right? Heating and air conditioning folks need to be profitable. Well, let's bring in these people that have to run a business and help us. And so let's use that. And everybody I've talked to, there's not one person I haven't talked to about this idea that hasn't said, I'm more than willing to volunteer. This is an extra cost to the county. This is a volunteer approach that these folks could come in and really help the county and then present the data and the rationale back to the commission. And then together we make a decision, and then we present it to the general public, as opposed to making a decision behind closed doors before a fundamental decision is made. That's the true way government should be run.
And, just to add to what he's saying, when you're on the city council, they have committees, and like the planning commission, they're the ones that get all of the, what people want to build, and then they go through it. They're the experts, and they look at all the codes, and, does it meet the Kaysville City codes? And if they're approved, then they bring them to the city council. And then we look at it and we say, okay, they went through it, and they are, we now know that the due diligence on that project has been done. Then we feel more confident with moving forward and approving things.
So exactly right. So that's hard work. I mean, that's the work that you're asking the commissioners to go and do. Fundamentally, we have the purse strings, and we need to execute those purse strings in the best interest of the citizens of Davis County. And that requires hard work to dig into the details, to understand not only the dollars, but the policy, the impact. Is that compassionate? Is it not compassionate? How does it impact folks? And that's what we need to do in order to be able to make good fundamental decisions. And we need to bring the citizens in. One of our biggest problems, once again, in Davis County is apathy. So how do you get rid of apathy?
But there are some of us who are not apathetic, who want to ask questions. And I haven't felt John is the only one I can go to and text or send an email to who will respond to me, because I don't know all the ins and outs of what's going on. So when I ask what may seem like a, less intelligent question that should be obvious, he gets me back to who I can ask or gives me the answer then. And that hasn't been there. Randy Elliott was good at that also for me.
Well, that drives to the point of trying to drive these meetings to an evening, number one. Mm-hmm. We ought to be open. We ought to be available for the citizens to come in. And I encourage people to challenge us.
But when the citizens came in and voiced their opinion,
but it didn't
their employee, two of the commissioners, didn't listen to them.
Right, you're exactly right. They did not listen, and it wasn't transparent. But we need to give the citizens the information necessary. We need to give them the venue to voice their opinions. So there's several venues, right? So one of those venues is the commission meeting that we want to move to an evening on Tuesday or Thursday, pick a date. But there's also these citizen committees that now you have people that you bring across the county in together. Well, there's not, like I said, there's not one person that I've talked to has not been absolutely 100% supportive of that as a position, because now it brings them into the decision making, and now they get to understand exactly what the issues are we have to deal with, whether it be financial, whether it be policy, whether it be state statute, whatever it may be. We've got to vet those, and then we need to bring in experts to help them to understand. Water's a great example, right? We need to bring in Brad Nelson, who runs Weber Basin. We need to bring in other water experts. We need to bring expert civil engineers from Utah State and the University of Utah and Weber. There are ways that we can address the water issue here, but we need to do it in an open format with the information, the data, and there's a process that you use to go do that makes the decisions very open and honest, as opposed to being behind closed doors.
And
Those are great comments, Scott. Ingrid, just going back to a little bit of what you said, I really do believe in transparency. And part of transparency is keeping your cell phone on and being able to talk to people. And I went out on Mills. I'm overseeing aging services, and I really love that group of people. We have volunteers that save the county $1 million, $1 million+ a year by volunteering to do Meals on Wheels and volunteering with other things as well. And I went out and I made friends with a couple of senior citizens, and I did make the mistake of giving my cell phone to a couple of them. And I forgot to turn my cell phone off at 2:00 in the morning, and I did get a phone call from one. And I had a great conversation in the middle of the night, but I do think that it's a rewarding experience to be a commissioner, because I never would have been able to cross paths with her had I not gone out, with Meals on Wheels. But when we talk about transparency, there's so many things with it. Transparency is being available, having your phone on, being approachable, making things understandable. You can make things as complicated as possible. That's not transparency. But you can put numbers in understandable, digestible ways. I mean, you can make it so a CPA will have a hard time understanding what you're talking about, or you could put the numbers in plain English. And, that's another thing I really appreciate about Susan and Scott, is that they take complex issues and they boil it down to understandable language that other people understand. And I try to do that too. Now, when we go back and you have that question, what would you do differently? One thing that I think that I would do differently, is I think that I would really work harder to understand where people were coming from, and to not just understand people that I agree with, but understand people that I disagree with and why. And I think I've become better. I've gone through a little bit of growth, quite a bit of growth with that. With people that strongly disagree with me. In fact, I had one person that I wouldn't consider an enemy, but would consider maybe an opponent. And now I think that now that we understand each other better, I think that we've graduated to even a position of friendship and respect. So I do have to say that Scott and Susan both represent that. They are so respectful. And I do say that I am endorsing Susan Lee, Scott, John Whitesides, and John Atkin. They're not politicians. So I believe that local politics does really well when we elect good, honest people that have integrity. And, a lot of times, there's a bad reputation going on with elected officials. They call us politicians. And I think the more years that we're in politics, maybe we're tempted to be less truthful, less transparent. And it's easier not to take the 2 a.m. phone call. And by the way, I do put my phone on silent now when I go to sleep. But, and I've had a couple missed calls.
we do understand people have lives also.
But, I have to say that I think that there's such an advantage to dipping that bucket down into the well of wisdom and knowledge. These two represent that well of wisdom and knowledge, and I think they're going to be excellent for the county. And I think our county is going to really improve and do even better because of them. And, I'm excited about John Atkin too. And he's running for sheriff. John Whiteside's brilliant man. I've known him for, nearly.
He's really impressed me.
Yeah. But,
Well, and Scott brings up the apathy, and I think sometimes I find, at least in my precinct, many of the citizens who are apathetic, I don't want to participate in politics. No, I won't come to that. No, I don't want to. I just don't want to be involved. That's who I'm voting for, but I don't want to sign because I just don't want to get involved in those things. But they tend to look for politicians. They want the politician who sent them the gift. Like, I don't get it. You're apathetic, but then you want the person you're saying, well, they don't have any experience.
So I think you make a great point. If I could just, so it's not about how big your signs are. It's not about how many signs you have. It's not about the trinket you got with your name engraved on it from some politician. It's about none of those things balance the budget. None of those things address the real concerns of the citizens. They're all external things that are out there. So I would just encourage people when they go out to vote, the vote being June 23rd, is that they look at and say, who has the expertise? Who has the ability to be transparent? Who's driven by special interests and who's not being driven by special interests? And who has that capability and expertise to actually represent me as a citizen? We have an obligation to represent the citizens, and I don't think that we're doing that to the degree that we should at this point.
And can I say just two things real quick? So I used to be in the boat of being, having that apathy. And a lot of that had to do with the stage of life I was in. I had young kids. I was busy with what they were doing. I didn't have time for politics. And, so I would lean heavily on people that were. And I think a lot of people do that within the community, which is fine.
I can see
we
that
all
too.
have our
Different stages of
yes,
life.
yes. So we are all in that stages. And then just one other point I want to be very clear. I and Scott don't need the job. Like we're our lives. Very, very content where I'm at, living a very good life. Scott and I, neither one of us need the paycheck. We're doing it because we care. That is what's driving us, not anything else. We're able to say, okay, I'm willing to take this on, and it's going to be a lot of sacrifice, but we're going to put ourselves out there, and hopefully the citizens out there can understand that we're doing it for them, not for us.
Service.
Service, yes.
Well, I have to agree with you there. This podcast is kind of the same thing. We don't get paid to run this podcast at all. In fact, in fact, it costs me thousands of dollars every month just to keep it going. So it's because we want to be involved. And I think when you get, like what you were just saying, when you get from a point where you're switched from representing the people to you want to take all the decisions unilaterally, all of a sudden you become a little more elitist. I'm in charge. I'm in control. You don't need to worry about it. I've got it under control. And you start not disclosing what the true budgets are, what the true costs are, because you know that people are going to question it. But in the end, it says, like, I just know better than you do. I can see the bigger picture. All of a sudden, you get the attitude, I'm smarter than the people now.
Well, a lot of back scratching, too.
Yeah, a lot of lobbyists start coming into play. And then you switch from representing the people to now you're making unilateral decisions. I'm in charge. I'm the boss. I'm the CEO of the county. I'm the CEO of the state, whatever it is that your position you're holding. That mental flip is the problem that a lot of politicians are having nowadays. And when you talk about transparency, if I'm going to go build an animal care center, that needs to go in front of the people and say, okay, we had this idea. We think we should build this. This is what it's going to do. This is what it's going to cost. Let's get some public opinion on it, right? Instead of just making a unilateral decision and say, no, we're going to make this thing 3 times bigger than what it needs to be. I'm going to play the animal activist. We shouldn't be killing animals, even though they're going to be miserable inside of a kennel this whole time with no attention from a human being at all. Animals don't do well like that. Or any of these other decisions. We got the Western Sports Park, and everybody loves a Western Sports Park, but I'd love to have a swimming pool in my backyard that's Olympic size, right? That's not possible, right? I don't have that ability. I'd love to go buy a couple new Teslas and have a bigger boat sitting in my yard too. So
Yeah.
sometimes you don't have the money. But as we said before we even started this podcast, a lot of politicians say, well, our income comes from the public. We got a big purse sitting out there, and I'm going to unilaterally make this decision. We got this spare money that just came in from the feds. It's going to cover the vast majority of the costs. We'll kind of force the public just kind of cover the maintenance costs and the month-to-month expenses of it. They're going to forgive us later because they're going to like what we put out there. Let's not worry about it. And decisions are made like that. And it's not in the best interest of the people.
So one area we haven't talked about is the dispatch center. And the reason this is important is one of I would say the most important part of being county commissioners is to take care of the 15 cities that we work with. And what's happened is currently we have 2 dispatch centers. There's the main one at the sheriff's center, and then there's one that they've built in Bountiful. Now they're saying we're going to do away with the Davis County one and let Layton build a new one, and we're going to move the Davis County one over to Layton. So we're going to have 2 still. But with that being said, I've talked to a couple of the mayors within Davis County, and they said, this is hurting us. This is costing us more money doing this. Why are you doing this? And I think John can speak better to, how that all came about. But that's not taking care of the people by doing what they're doing. They've done surveys. One dispatch center is the best solution.
Because they are just answering phones. Like, that doesn't need to be location
How big do they think
specific.
Davis County is that we need 2 dispatch centers? Salt Lake County doesn't even need 2 dispatch centers.
even make
We're some of the smallest communities in the country, let alone the state. I mean, get real.
Yeah, where do we go talk to people about that?
We're not L.A. here. We're not L.A. that we've got 16 million people in our county.
That's not where the emergency services are dragging out of, so you don't need to have these locations. Am I wrong?
Yeah, so it's one dispatch center is ideal, and it would actually be a better cost for all the cities to do it that way. But from my understanding, Bountiful City, for whatever reason, decided they wanted their own. And then once they got it built, what did they do? They turned around and they recruited some other cities to say, come on over, we'll give you a better rate. So of course they did. So they went over there, but now that's weakened the Davis County because it's taken some of that away from us that, we had the structure, we had the personnel already. And then when you take that away, then what do?
So when I call 911, where's my call going to?
Well, that's the law of supply and demand right there. That's called competition, and competition is good in my book. That means Davis County is not offering it for cheap enough to the city. So what's Davis County doing wrong that's making these cities go someplace else that all of a sudden is cheaper?
It's a good question. That's
So,
a very good question.
I think that answered it for itself right there.
But part of the issue that I think Susan's highlighting is that the role of the Davis County Commission is to represent all 15 cities, not to represent one or the other, but to do what's best for the county. That requires us to talk to and negotiate with the mayors and their city councils, and to talk through the data and then be transparent about what is the best thing for the county. And so that's the decision criteria, should be what's the best thing for the county overall. What we've seen in the past is that some cities get excluded for whatever reason. I'm not going to talk about what those reasons are here, but there are multiple ones that they get excluded from benefits, from funding, from things being put in their city. Anyway, so they get excluded. And so the purpose of the county commissioners is not to do that. It is to represent the entire county. And that requires us to come together as a coalition, make decisions as a coalition moving forward.
This makes sense why I had some delegates telling me they did not want former mayors as county commissioners because they were concerned about there being a leaning towards
Favoritism?
them. Yeah.
Yes.
Which I don't, I would hope that those people would be honest and not do that.
I share that opinion. Somebody asked me when I was running, what city I was from. And I said, being a county commissioner is like having 15 children in Davis County. You're not supposed to have a favorite child. And I think that's kind of a struggle, maybe a temptation for previous mayors to take off their mayor hat and put on a county commissioner hat. So, Scott, Susan make great points about that. So, with this dispatch center, I come from emergency management, and we had a great big expensive feasibility study, and it would have been more effective for the whole county-wide, to have one unified dispatch center. And that's how Weber County operates. Weber has one unified dispatch center, but the decisions have been made. That's probably water under the bridge right now, but I believe it's a bad decision.
But I do still have the same question. If there's two, when I call 911, where is my call going to?
It depends on which city you're from. So I believe that Kaysville and Farmington went to Bountiful. So now those go to the Bountiful dispatch. And then, I believe that Layton City is going to have their dispatch center finished sometime in October. I might be wrong on that date, but so if you're, Sunset, West Point, Layton City, Clearfield, Fruit Heights, those will probably go to Layton. So, and there are some winners and some losers. Some cities are going to pay less. Some cities are going to pay
As
more.
the cities make their own dispatch centers, are the counties paying for that, or are the cities covering that full 100%?
Yeah, so there's a fee that is paid for. There's the 911 call fee. So there's the state reimburses the dispatch centers for it. So when a couple of the cities went to Bountiful instead, it made it not profitable for the county to do it. We weren't even at break even. So that's why we're going to divest ourselves from the dispatch center and have Layton and Bountiful do it for us. But so great.
Will that put money back in the budget?
See, Susan and Scott are not elected yet, but they understand the issues.
Yeah.
And so they're leaning forward. This is why I think they set themselves apart from other candidates, because I don't believe other candidates even know about this. And it's so important and fundamental to not just the safety and security of Davis County, but these are important issues that really matter, and they know about it. And I think that having candidates lean forward like they both do is such a benefit. And I really want all your listeners and voters to really understand that they are the best candidates.
And I would say there's so many areas that we can do better without diminishing the services that we need to provide. And one thing that I have looked at is within the county, we've never done anything like a service level solvency test, which is where you look at, do we have duplication of services that are, is there services or is there employees that are doing things that were once required but really aren't required anymore? How can we be more efficient? How can we take care of those dollars and do better with it? And so
I love that.
and we need to do that.
Well, it's something that's done in business all the time. So being broken out into different organizations to provide a product or a service, right, in commercial industry, what do you do first? You decide what your charter is. You deconflict the charters from everybody else, and exactly what Susan's talking about. You figure out where there's duplication, and you get rid of the duplication. Then you put the right people in the right places to be able to go execute the programs that are out there. And so that becomes almost one of the first things that should be done, I believe, is when we're elected, is to do exactly that, is to really look at what are your charters, what are you going to do, is there duplication of effort, to Susan's point, and then how do we execute against that to be most efficient? So once again, it goes back to how do you strategically put these in place? How do you efficiently put these in place? How do you assess the information and the data to be able to do that? Those are key issues that the county commissioner should execute against. That, once again, requires knowledge, experience, hard work, and tenacity to make those things happen. And that's where I think that we, as a group, can really help and represent the citizens of Davis County. It always goes back to the true order of what is government for? Is to represent the citizens. That's one big one. The other one is public safety. Let me just talk about that just really quickly. The current 2 commissioners will use public safety as a stick to beat you down with, saying, oh, you're going to lose public safety stuff. That is not true. We will not reduce public safety. There's more efficient ways we can go about doing it, but we will not cut public. That is a critical service that the county commission provides, and we commit. I'm committed. I think we're all committed here to providing that service to our citizens. So when they use that as a stick, you have to stand back.
Exactly how I have felt. You put it right into the right words.
And one thing, I always get asked about what certain things about the sheriff's department. What people have to understand is, as commissioners, we are not able to tell or say anything that the sheriff's department does. The sheriff is in charge of the sheriff's department. The only thing the commissioners are over is the purse strings. So what happens in there, the organization, if there's a mess that's created in the sheriff's department, that is up to the sheriff to fix. The commission cannot say or have, we can talk to them and say, we suggest, but so just to be clear, if people are wondering, as commissioners, we do not have a say, but we can try and influence and make sure things are run efficiently.
Well, that's why the sheriff is an elected position.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a reason why it's not an appointed position; it's an elected position. But they have that responsibility.
Yeah. So, but I think it's really important that we collaborate with them, and so we can't direct. But I think the whole idea of collaboration is really critical, because we've got to be going on the same path. That's the way business runs. You set a vision together, and then you execute against that vision, and you make sure the citizens are part of it. And so I know I keep coming back to this whole citizen idea, but I'm just passionate about that we need to represent the citizens of Davis County. It's your money. It's the citizens' money. It's not our money. It's your money. We need to execute against what they need. One of those big needs, once again, is safety. So the sheriff's office is very important, and we will collaborate with them. We won't direct, but we will collaborate with them and every other department that's there, in order that we're on the same page and we have a strategic vision, and it's aligned with what the citizens want.
So as a private citizen, when I'm making a purchase, let's say I'm going to go out and buy a new car, and my car's going to be $130,000
3/4-ton truck.
3/4-ton truck. What they come out nowadays. And so I'm looking at this big expense, but I have to calculate a lot more than just the initial expense, and that's where people fall short. That's all it's going to cost. But then I've got to consider
How much your tires going to be every
how
year?
much tires, because they're probably $300 tires each tire, so that's going to be another $1,200 a year, or every few years I'm going to have to spend. I have to figure my oil changes. I got to figure out my DEF fluid. I got to figure out all this other expenses, my annual taxes, my gas expense, because it barely gets 8 miles to the gallon. Whatever the expenses are.
Insurance, yeah.
Yeah, insurance is going to be more expensive. All this kind of stuff I have to calculate into, okay, I've got the money to buy the vehicle, but do I have the monthly income to cover the ongoing expenses, in addition to my home, my utility bills, my cell phone bill? You have to add up all these other expenses you already have, and I think a lot of politicians get tunnel vision. When they see a cool project, they forget about public safety and all these other expenses that are ongoing monthly expenses. So when we were looking at this $12 million override, how much of that was one-time costs that's going to fizzle out once we have that paid out, and how much of that is actually sticking with us as ongoing, recurring monthly expenses?
That's such a great question, and I'm impressed that you understand this to the depth.
I was a business owner for 25 years.
Yeah.
I know it.
So so we did raise taxes 14.9%. So that brought it from 12 down to 6, because we have $6 additional million that we're bringing in. But there's other things that we have, like we're doing early.
But when we
buyout
paid
for
off the 6,
retirement.
is that $6 million still owing?
Yeah.
Right now, it's still
so
left and owing. And how much of that is, once we have that $6 million paid off, is paid off and done, or how much is that is going to be recurring
for
expenses.
next year, yeah, it would be recurring expenses. So we,
Stresses me
So are we
out.
going to be $12 million short every single year from now on?
6 million. 6
Yeah.
million, 'cause I did.
Or 6 million?
Yeah.
Because all 6 million is recurring expenses that's going to be hitting us every single year from now
So
on.
the commissioners work with the controller. So other counties have it known as the auditor, the person that oversees all the money for the county and makes recommendations and whatnot. But we changed the title from auditor to controller. It's basically the same thing. But the controller, Scott Park, and he's running again too. I believe that he'll win the election handily. He's really good. But he's been making recommendations to save money. We had these post-employee benefits that we had. It was a $24 million liability to the taxpayers. So basically what that is when people retire, the county will pay for an additional 5 years health coverage. And that's a benefit that the state of Utah certainly doesn't offer that to the state employees, and other counties certainly don't offer that. So
So why would we offer that?
yeah, so there were some recommendations to reduce that benefit, and so that will sunset and go away. But that saved quite a bit of money there. We also had the 401k where we have a retirement program with Utah Retirement Systems, and then on top of that we had a 401k, and that was kind of a hard hit for some of our employees, and they weren't happy about some of that. But you take 4%
I
of
always
your
say though, when
salary.
people are upset, but it's like, does government exist to provide jobs? No. So
And yeah, so that was a hit. So we decreased that. We had a 401k. So for every $100 you make, you could put 4% of your salary towards that. So $4, and then the county would match that with $4 of county money or taxpayer money. So we reduced that from 4% down to 2%. So and then we've had some early retirement incentives. And so when we have the higher paid older employees retire, we can bring in newer employees for less money. So we are making some dramatic improvements. And, I've been talking to our controller, and, hopefully we don't know where we're standing right quite yet, but hopefully by the end of this year, we will have a balanced budget.
Well, our population keeps going up, and so obviously public safety is going to go up because with more people, you need more officers and stuff like that out there. But you're the data
Taxes
guy.
are coming in
Where did these monthly expenses go to where we have a?
Well, I think that they went to a lot of places. I don't think it's just one thing. So I'm going to use back to your analogy of your $130,000 3/4 ton King Ranch truck that you just purchased, right? So, and then you did the analysis that says, well, how does that fit into my overall budget? Because I've not only got that, but I've also got 3 kids I'm putting through college, and I've got heating bills and electrical bills. I've got this bill and that bill, and so you have to look at it from an integrated standpoint. So I'll give you one is that from 2023 to 2024, based on the data that's in here, the government. I would make sure I get this right. The general government increase was 32%. That wasn't across the board. That was in a certain line item that was there. It went up 32%. And the increase in the number of people in Davis County went up 1%. So you tell me how those two equate to each other moving forward. So the devil is in the details. And so as you vote, as folks vote for the county commissioners, I believe you need to vote for people that are willing to go dive into the details, to answer specifically the question that you just asked, to understand the fundamentals of the budget and where that budget goes, where there's duplication, what Susan said earlier, and where there's not duplication, where there's things that we've funded that have now met their timeline. She talked about that for a tax, and now let's put it back into the budget. Let's take it out of the budget as a tax. I mean, that's the fundamental job, I believe, of the commissioners, to be able to have the expertise to be able to go do that. And so I think you want people that, like accountants, like physicists, that have to go do this, like executives in the commercial world that know how to do this. I'm not convinced that having been a municipal government employee is a real benefit, because the approach that they've taken is tax and spend. To your point earlier, it's focus on a thing, and they lose perspective of the integration of all the other things.
And I would add to what's being said is when they said we needed that 30% tax increase, at the time, it was also said there is nowhere we can cut. It's impossible. And yet what's happened since they only did half the amount? They're cutting and cutting and cutting. They're finding the ways to save. So a big question I look at is if they're able to do that, why didn't they do that before they went out asking for the tax increase? Why didn't they make those cuts
That's
first?
a great point.
Great question.
So that is something that you need representatives in there who will take care of the people's purse strings, and take that responsibility on so that you don't have to go out and ask for that tax increase. We can do better, and that's why I'm running. I think that's why Scott's running, because we know we can do a lot better.
Yeah.
Well, let's without calling names or belittling people, let's go and analyze both Stevenson and Lorraine. What things have they done that are completely off? Decisions they've made that are completely off that the public doesn't necessarily know about, behind the scenes type decisions that the public should know about when considering how they're going to vote. And let's tackle what you would have done differently. So let's hit Bob first. I'll let each of you comment. I definitely want to get your opinion too, because you're there in the room with these guys and you have to confront them every single day. So what decisions have they made, policy-wise, and what would you have done differently?
Well, this is a simple one, but I think it's reflective, is that in one of the council meetings that I was at, John proposed to open with prayer, right? In the rostrum, this is a simple thing, but it's reflective of what exactly you're talking about. On the front of the rostrum, it says, "In God we trust." And so John proposed that, and neither one of the other two commissioners endorsed it. And so it died on the vine.
That was Bob Stevenson.
That was Bob and Lorraine, and they both said they basically didn't second the motion, and so it died.
To punish him for not disagreeing, I'm not going to ask him because I know he's not going to answer me. But do you think that was
I'll answer it.
that was in retribution,
I
or
will-
because they do not want prayer to start? I don't understand.
So since John said he'll answer it, I'll let him answer.
Okay.
Well, I am a man of faith. I mean, our family, like most families, we've had personal tragedies, family tragedies, and I've relied on God quite a bit. And I believe that invoking invocations or a thought before a meeting, gives it a better tone to a meeting. It helps us know that, there's a higher power, that we do represent people, that we're being leaders for people that have given us their trust. And I believe that opening with an invocation is appropriate.
As an attendee, I feel like it centers me so that I will have the right focus to hear opinions I may not agree with and remind me to keep myself in check.
Yeah. Great, Ingrid. I appreciate that. So I wanted to start every meeting. Most of our cities in Davis County do start with a thought or with an invocation, with a prayer. And I think that Davis County shares something in common with Salt Lake County. Salt Lake County doesn't open with a prayer or an invocation either, or a thought, and neither does Davis County. But traditionally, we have. So I don't know at what point we stopped having prayer in our commission meetings, but I would like to bring it back. I don't understand why either of the other two commissioners didn't want to have that. We talked about it in some of our other meetings and I wanted to put that on the agenda for the commission meeting. And I thought that because it's an election year and because Lorena's running for commission again and Bob's running in the legislature, I did have the thought that maybe because it's an election year that they would have approved it. And they said, well, it was because of improper process, and that's why we voted no, which I think is just
What was the
simple.
improper process?
Well, I think that's hogwash. I think that's not
You're saying
true.
you didn't ask in the right manner?
Yeah, so our agenda meetings, they go through approvals, they go through attorney review. we could have, I made a motion, it didn't get a second, so it failed, but we could have had a motion, could have had a second and voted and brought an invocation or a thought back to commission meeting. And there's some things that you have to step through with government, with fairness. You have to open prayer up to different groups. It can't just be one particular religion, or you can have a thought. And most of our cities in Davis County have that. So I guess I'm scratching my head. I don't know why that didn't pass, especially during an election year. But I've heard both of them give prayers in other circumstances. So I'm still scratching my head, wondering why.
And you can't blame me for wondering, because I have been aware of them not including you in meetings where decisions were made because they know that you would have a different opinion. And I don't appreciate that. That's why we have odd numbers in voting, so that there can't be, those secret things happen. And so in my opinion, it makes me wonder if that was payback.
Well, I don't know, Salt Lake County, I don't know why they don't have prayer. Traditionally, they have.
Oh, I could tell you exactly why they don't have.
But Davis County, we definitely should. That's why.
Yeah, you invite people of different faiths to give, and if it's somebody who's atheist, they can give the thought at that meeting.
We did have a gentleman that came and presented at our commission meeting this week. He is a Hindu leader, and he did give an invocation. But on the agenda, we didn't call it an invocation. We called it a presentation. So, he came and presented and gave a what I thought was a very beautiful prayer. And he's provided those at other, government entities as well. In fact, he was at BYU and Provo, and, he does a lot of outreach. So I do think that was good, but I think that we should make it a permanent thing. I think that
the danger you have with not having prayer, and I'll tell you the exact problem with that, is the left wants to go more socialistic. They want to go more communistic, where the government provides the freedom. The government provides rules, the government gives you the rights. I mean, that's what socialism and communism is. Yep. And so when you're trying to specifically cater to a more left-leaning, a more Democrat-leaning audience, you're going to make that decision. Now, I can guarantee that's why they made that decision, because they know that the conservative side of Davis County is already not going to vote for Bob Stevenson or Lorraine. They know they're specifically catering to the more left-leaning, the more liberal-leaning side of Davis County to get their votes from. And the fear and the problem you have when you do that is you go back to our founding fathers. We get our freedoms from our Creator. They do not come from government. And the second you start getting that skewed in your head, where your freedoms are being fried not by a great Creator, you don't believe in a great Creator, we the people are no longer important.
Yeah.
It's the elitists. We're going to get up there, we're going to make the rules, we're going to set the tone, we're going to see what freedoms you do and do not have, and then that's where they start making decisions to erode your freedoms, and they think nothing of it. Why? Because they don't believe in a Creator. They believe in just government and elitism.
You're bringing up a really good point. I brought a personal piece of artwork to my office. It's Carl Bloch's painting with Jesus, where he's being mocked by the Roman soldier, and he has the crown of thorns on his head, and he's looking right at you. And I put that right above my computer to remind me that I answer to a higher power, and to encourage me to be ethical and honest in the decisions I make. And it was kind of interesting, because I did have some complaints from people, and they thought that it, was inappropriate. Now, it's not illegal. You can bring in your private artwork into your private office.
I don't even know why you'd even refer to that being illegal, because it's freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. It's like you were saying, we're not going to have the same person up there every single week, because then that's specifically what the Constitution says we cannot do, is we cannot prop up and have a state-sponsored religion, right?
Right.
Have anybody do it. But I am deathly afraid of an individual that may be a politician that does not answer to a higher power, because if you don't answer to a higher power, that means the state,
your own attitude becomes the higher power. And then it's no longer we the people anymore. If you believe in a higher power, you believe the people are your authority, are your boss. And if you lose your belief in a higher power, then the state now becomes the boss. And the entire country is having that problem right now. I mean, we have a mass epidemic, particularly in our bigger cities, New York, Mamdani, Chicago's, I mean, he's so socialist, it's not even funny. Go up to Seattle, way socialist. They've turned from the founding fathers, from the roots of this country, to something that is completely against our Constitution, completely against we the people. So again, I wouldn't trust any politician that does not have any type of a belief in a higher power. Because the second you lose that belief in a higher power, the we the people no longer become the priority. Because government becomes the priority. And you, like I was just saying, you see this in Mamdani, you see this in Chicago, you see this in Seattle, Elon Omar, all these people, the government is the supreme authority. They are the supreme authority once they get in that power, and they will not let go of it. That's why Democrats try to steal elections and sway the legislative districts, right? They try to sway the legislative districts. They try to do all the redistricting maps. They try to do everything unconceivable to stay in power because they themselves do not believe that they answered anybody. Yeah, I'll cater to you during the election. I'll say the right things. But in the end, I'm smarter than you. I'm in charge. I know how to do this better than you because you don't have that higher authority. And so the second you lose that higher authority, I think you should be out. Because we have a massive problem here in the state of Utah where everybody that is apathetical to anything that we're doing don't want to get involved. Like she was saying, the big old problems all over the place with that type of apathy. I don't want to get political. I don't like the infighting. I don't like the confrontation. I don't like the name calling that Trump is doing, whatever it is you're saying. If you're not involved, if you don't get involved, if you don't profess your values, that's when everything starts going left. And we lose not only our conservatism, the conservative values, but you lose your freedoms completely. People really don't understand that conservative values, Republicans, we're the only reason why the country, states, counties, cities still have any freedoms at all. Because if the left were to get their way, we'd be under socialistic rule. And people are like, oh, that's too harsh. I'm like, that's what it is. That's their thought process. They have lost their belief in God. They have no belief in God. And when you lose that, the state becomes the authority. And I guarantee you, the more we go left-leaning, the more power and authority you're going to lose. We look at Oregon, we look at Colorado and what they've done, where parents have lost complete control of their own kids. The state can come in and do whatever they want, take them at any time. You misgender them, kid's gone. They can do transitions anytime they want to now. And it's not just that. There's a lot of other things. You look at any of these other states where the people have completely lost power. Completely, it's just gone. Whether it's through taxation, the vast majority of them are taxed into oblivion. California's taxed into oblivion, or they're regulated into oblivion with the mass amounts of regulations that California has and New York has. That is a prime example when government becomes the superpower, and that's all you answer to. And so when you say they're not willing to say a prayer, I'm saying it's significantly deeper than that, because the only reason why you want to allow a prayer is because you're trying to cater to a left-leaning audience, to a more liberal audience, and the more you lean that way, the more government is your authority and not God and the people is your authority. You can't have it both ways. It's not we the people and government. It's either God and we the people, or it isn't.
You're making such great points. I agree with that. And the thing that I'm scratching my head, still wondering, Davis County is a really good county. We have
Why did we go liberal then?
We have so many religious people, good people, and I believe the majority of Davis County is religious and does support prayer. So I'm still.
And I don't care what religion you're supporting. I don't care if you're LDS or if you're Catholic or you're just a non-denominational Bible study group. I don't care what it is. You have to believe in a higher power, because if you don't, then state becomes more important, and you will, guaranteed 100%, you will lose your freedoms. Great. Because government will take it from you. These elitist type of people, these elitist type of thinkers will take that from you. That is their goal. And when you have overspending, that's proof, right? I know more than you. I'm going to spend your money for you. Don't worry about it. When you have lack of transparency, that is evidence that government is more important to them than you, the people. They no longer think in a higher power. Why? Because they're proving it. I don't want prayer. I don't want transparency. I'm just going to do whatever it is I want. That's evidence right there that they no longer believe in we, the people. They've lost their belief in the higher power, and government now becomes the supreme authority. That's the frankness of it. There's no way to construe that any other way than that. And people are like, oh, you're reading too far into that. It's not that extreme. It's not that black and white. No. Yes, it is. Guarantee it is. So let's get back into this where what has Lorraine done? What has Bob Stevenson done where you would have made a completely different decision? So, I mean, we can go here, then we can...
Yeah, so when I look at your responsibility as a representative, which is what you are when you're elected, when I was on the Kaysville City Council, going back to that, and I would get issues that would come before me. And so when I saw those issues and the people that it would affect, I always went to that neighborhood and I would talk to the people and I would get their response. And a lot of times they had no idea that this was even going to be coming up. So by doing that, I made them aware of what was coming. And so the reason I say that is because we had an issue with the county. The state was saying you have to have a homeless shelter. And then they backed off of it and then they said, well, we're not going to mandate a homeless shelter, but you have to have a plan. Well, Commissioner Kamalu, she was in charge. She was over the homeless shelter and they put her over taking care of that. So she got a committee together and they started planning it. And the first mistake they made was they didn't announce it to the public. We're having this meeting. We want your input. Please come. Give us your input because we want to get this right. But they didn't do that. They got together, they had the meetings, they made the decisions, and then once the decision was made, and in the interim, she also ran to the state legislature begging for that money because if you do build one, you get a bunch of money. And that's what she craves. She craves to have more money because then she can spend more. Plus, she knew that they needed more money because of the override. But with that being said, when they announced it, okay, we've got a homeless shelter. We're going to put it in this city, and these are the places we're looking at. And there were three places initially. The people were upset. They were up in arms. There's no way.
Why is this the first we're hearing of it?
It doesn't make sense. It's by a school. It's in an area where there's no amenities for them to get. There's no, and on and on and on. And she stood back and was scratching her head and was like, what's wrong? There was no connection there with the people she represents.
That's that elitist mentality. That's where you lose scope of who's the boss. You are in charge. And you're completely disconnected. Yeah. You're completely disconnected.
So that is something that was alarming to me. And that was another reason I wanted to run, is because I saw how that was handled and I couldn't believe it. And there were so many people that were upset, even to this day, are very upset about how that was handled. And because people were so upset, then she started lying about how she handled it. And so to me, when any of your representatives start to change the story and not stick with the truth of it, it's time for them to leave.
Well, I've heard a lot of stuff, not to really go attack Lorraine, but I looking at what she's done, I think she's incredibly narcissistic. Just narcissism just bleeds from her. And I've dealt with narcissistic people my entire life and have studied it greatly just to learn how to deal with those type of people. When you lose that type of in-touchness with your people and all of a sudden you surround yourself in your own little bubble where you think this is how everybody thinks, or you spent too much time in Washington, D.C. amongst the liberals, and you get back home here and you find that everybody's thinking something completely different like Romney did or what Curtis is doing right now. You lose touch of that where the bubble is everything, right? Your thought process, everything's around this bubble, and all of a sudden you get out there in the real world and find out that's not the case. And then you swing that as like, well, it's just an attack on me personally. Everybody's attacking me. You don't understand. I'm not trying to do that. And you make it about you yourself, and everybody else is wrong, and they just don't understand you. Well, that's just a narcissism right there. That's textbook narcissism.
That explains why I've just noticed she converses and makes herself open to the wealthy or the well-respected or somebody who owns a great business or something. And they'll go, we love her. She's so nice. They work with her. But the average citizen doesn't get to sit down and talk with her.
Textbook.
Let me bring up one additional one. Since you asked for specifics, let's talk about that. So the decision that's being made by the county commissioners that should be fundamentally private business versus government business. So let's talk about that. So should the government be running the sports park facility, or should that be private industry? Should they be running a number of, the convention center, for example? Why is that not being run by somebody else? So you got to look really hard at what should be government focused and what should be private industry focused. Because when we get into the business of private industry, you start taking jobs away from the public sector.
Exactly. And the government does not exist to provide jobs.
Right. And you're exactly right. So we got to take a really hard look of what needs versus wants are, and how business versus private business versus what the government should do. That's the proper role of government, is not to get into the private business sector. So one of the examples is in Bountiful, for example. The past mayor, they have a restaurant that they're running as a city operation. Now, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. That seems like a very private business thing. So why are they doing that? You have to ask that fundamental question.
City-owned
restaurant.
City-owned restaurant. Government-owned restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why?
If
Where
I
in
were
your
a
head-
pizza owner, I would be suing.
Well, exactly. That's the point. You're taking private industry opportunities away from private industry, and then running. That doesn't. Why does that make sense?
That's the other party.
So we got Mondani and Bountiful. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not going to go that far. You can go that far, but I'm not going to go that far.
We as a podcast, we go as far as we want. I have no.
But it's a fundamental question. It's just not. Those are examples, but the fundamental
and now
question.
That former mayor has bought a ticket to run for a county commission seat, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So you just got to look at that, and so we need to make good decisions. And once again, I keep saying this, but I just believe it with my heart of hearts, is that we have to represent the citizens of Davis County. And does that really represent the citizens of Davis County? I would say no.
What specific thing either Lorraine or Bob Siemens have done where you have made a completely different decision in Wadding?
Well, like I said, with the homeless shelter, I would have done it out in the open. I would have invited all the community to be involved, have a say, or at least know what was going on, so that you didn't have all of the problems they had when they did make the decision of those 3 spots. And there were a lot of I would say solutions that came up after those decisions were made, and people were like, "Yeah, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this?" But it was something that they just.
You mean talking with the citizens, we came up with good solutions?
Yeah, so it was just something that they had already made those decisions. So any other, opportunities to do something other than that were kind of thrown out the door. And it just boggled my mind. Why wouldn't you want that citizen input? That's where you get the best ideas. I'm not saying that group of people, that committee, weren't really good at making choices and whatnot, but why not bring in others who have a vested interest that you wouldn't even think about that would want to have a say, and bring that voice in and really get a good feel for what the community would like? Because I think if they would have done that, it would have been done. And I just think that we need to take UDOT as a good example. right now, when UDOT has a project, any kind of project, they first start going out to the community that's going to be affected by that project, and they start talking to them. They invite them in. Come and look at the plans. Do you want to be on the citizen committee for that? And then they start putting the citizen committee together. Then they include the citizen committee with what they're going to do, and they usually try and get a representative from all the cities affected. I had the opportunity for 4 years. I was a citizen on the committee for the West Davis corridor and met monthly, once a month for 4 years as they went through that whole project to keep all the citizens informed. Beautiful concept. It's the way that we should do it within the county.
And it's not an easy thing to do because I think, you're always going to have your group of people that come in and want to complain and oppose without any data guy. And, that's not a fun process. But when you want to be in public office and be a servant to the public, that just comes with the job. So you can't shut out the average citizen from the process.
Yeah, and one more thing I would add, if you don't mind, a different thing. So when you increase taxes on the citizens' backs, the last thing you should be doing is using that taxpayer money to fly off and go on trips, supposedly to represent what you do with the people's money. Like,
Yeah.
recently.
Hawaii.
Yes.
Yeah. How come you're not in Hawaii, John?
I have to tell you,
You could have gone.
I've been to Hawaii one time and I loved it. I could have gone, but my conscience stopped me from going. And when I was considering going on that, I thought of all the widows and all the elderly people that were begging us not to have a tax increase. And it wasn't just, we also had a National Association of Counties when we were in Washington, D.C. I skipped that. I skipped the Hawaii trip. There was also another, there's a housing conference that was in San Francisco that Lorraine attended. There's another one coming up in New Orleans. I'm not going to be going to that either because I just have a hard time justifying that on a hard year of taxing.
They've been at Zoom for a reason.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you can learn a lot from a book. Reading a book, you can learn everything that you learn at a conference sometimes. So, I skipped out this conference in New Orleans. There's a couple of transportation lectures that I'm going to go on, and I've talked to another one of my friends who's a commissioner for a different county, and he told me that he will take very copious notes for me and bring it back and share. So I'm going to skip going to New Orleans.
I'm glad you said that because I know she's going to hold that out as I go to all these things and I'm so much more learned because I go and collect this information on the beach.
Well, in fairness, I did, when she did go to Washington, D.C., I asked her if she could bring back information and share it with me. And she did. She brought some limited information back and shared with me, but nothing that I couldn't have learned.
You're so gracious.
Yeah. So, but that was, and I think that there was something that came out. The Maui trip, it was Maui, Hawaii, and Maui went through some natural disasters, which we all know about. But I've worked in emergency management. I'm a subject matter expert.
You can
with
talk to
disasters.
Glenn Beck. He still has his organization there on the ground, still helping while everybody else has pulled out. So if she needed information,
So
she could have called
I
back.
think that was a conference that could have been skipped because we do have a commissioner that's a subject matter expert on disasters. And I think that was probably a conference that could have been and should have been skipped. And in fairness to Bob Stevenson, he skipped that conference too. But I think he had something else that prevented him from going.
I won't say what.
Yeah, but I do think that was very bad to go to Hawaii on the year of a tax increase.
Does not look good.
And I think it's bad to go to New Orleans too. New Orleans has a reputation for being a fun city and that, but I found it difficult.
It's
for me to go to
important
any of those
for sure.
this year.
And then you can look at my parents who were willing to cut their Reach network and say, you know what, we couldn't cut, but we're going to go to Hawaii. But go ahead and you sacrifice to me, that makes no sense. That's where you're losing touch.
It's very hypocritical right there. So let's go to the office atmosphere. So, John, what's the atmosphere like working with the other two right now?
Yeah,
The
so-
honest
So I will say there are good qualities. Bob Stevenson, I made a mistake one time. I did something I should not have done. I pulled an agenda item off the agenda that he had put on there. That was not my right to do that. And, Bob was gracious about it. And he, took me aside, not in the meeting, but, took me aside and said, you shouldn't have done that. So there is some, there's some good things, and everybody has good qualities and everybody has bad qualities. Bob and I agree on a lot of things. I found that he can cooperate and work with things on many issues. So I will say that there's good and bad, and we agree and disagree. I find it, challenging to work with Lorraine Kamalu, with Commissioner Kamalu. A lot of times, I think a lot of that originates because we have different political views. I really do believe in using every taxpayer dollar wisely. And, I'm sure she would say that she believes in using it wisely as well, but we have different definitions of what wisely is. So the atmosphere with it, we have agreements. Sometimes we have some strong disagreements, and then, and I've learned with Bob, sometimes we have strong disagreements, and then, we can be friendly later. But every commission has its challenges, its ups and downs. And at the convention, we had a lot of people that were talking, maybe friends with Lorraine in particular, who said that our commission's not friendly with each other and that. So that was kind of interesting to hear. But I think that, the tone I think it's been a stressful year. I'll tell you, when you kick the can down the road for years and you ignore your financial experts when they keep saying you've got to, slow down spending or raise taxes, you can't have your cake and eat it too. I think that this was a very stressful year for all three of us. And I can understand. And, we had some public hearings. We had 3 open houses, which by statute we're not required to have. And we had criticism on that, but I still think that was better that we met with the public in that. But it's been a stressful time. It's hard when you have all these competing virtues. It's walking a tightrope. The employees are worried. What do these cuts mean for them? So the commissioners do get a lot of pressure.
That concerns me, that I worry that the county employees, because of course you're going to look out for, feeding your family. But again, we don't exist to provide jobs, only the ones that we need. And I always worry that they, think, well, we like Lorraine because she'll just get the money from wherever to keep me. And she's so nice.
But I will say,
and that you're the bad guy.
we haven't laid anybody off, and I will say that, when we cut the 401k from 4% to 2%, the other 2 commissioners supported that. And when we cut the post-employee benefits, the 5 years health coverage, when we cut that, both commissioners supported that. So I don't know if pin the tail on the donkey got pinned on me for that, but they both supported that. So, we do agree on some things, but we do disagree on a great deal of other things.
I would love to see 3 people with like virtues and
So
working together.
on that topic, I think that we have a very unique opportunity right now, which is to change the culture. So that culture change is back to the importance on what the citizen needs and wants. I know we've talked about that a lot, but that's the culture that we need to foster within the county commission's office.
And the culture that I, as the taxpayer, am the boss.
Well, and you should expect that. And if we don't do that, then you have a very good way to do that, which is vote out the people that aren't aligned with that, and to vote in people that are aligned with that. So once again, I think that a culture change could be incredibly positive, not only for the employees at the county commission, but also for all of the citizens that are out there. And so that's really, I think, what we're trying to do is fundamentally build this culture around what's important to the citizen. How do we best meet those needs? How can we put that in place so it is actually executable? Look at what's there now and decide on things that aren't aligned with that culture and change them. So once again, I think on this vote that we're going to be having here very shortly, it's critical that we look at that culture and try to drive a culture of transparency, of accountability, of having people that have processes and knowledge on how to make good decisions, to how to assess those decisions. That becomes key. And I think you made a point, too, of having 3 commissioners that can work together. That doesn't mean we'll always agree, by the way.
Of course not.
We won't always agree. I want to, they may not agree with me and I won't agree with them, but regardless, there's a process in place that's based in here's the real information to be able to make those decisions. And usually when you have good information, you make good decisions.
What else is in this book that would surprise you?
There's many things, everything from we talk about the growth in our community, how many people are coming in. So let's talk about it. Well, and I talked about this a minute ago, from 23 to 24, there's a 1% increase. So you can look at high density.
1% increase in population.
In population, that was it. So you can look at that, and you can now look at what high density housing is doing, for example.
So are we going too fast?
So at the risk of being ridiculed, I will say I think we need to put a pause, not a moratorium, but a pause on the high density housing for now. And the reason why is because we need to do an evaluation. And that evaluation will be very in-depth, which will say, okay, do we really need to grow it that much? Number one. Number two, did it meet the intent? The intent was affordability. So if you've gone to look at some of these condos, they're $500,000 to $1 million a pop. That is not affordable. We have to relook at that. There's also an impact to water. How much green space are we getting rid of? I mean, there are multiple things we have to look at in terms to determine what it is. So as a systems engineer, if you make a change over here, it makes an impact over here. There's always tied to something. Well, high density housing has a tie. And we need to look at those things and evaluate those and say, does it make sense? That doesn't. If it merits, then we continue, right? Or maybe there's a different path that actually gets us affordable housing as opposed to $500,000 to $1 million a pop thing, right?
I think that's the bigger question too, because I mean, most of this doesn't even rest on your guys' shoulders, because most of the high density issues are going to rely on the cities,
Yes.
right? They're the ones doing their master planning, all that kind of stuff. But you hit a really key point. The whole purpose behind high density housing is affordability. We have a massive, massive problem in this state where housing is out of control. And all of our kids who are getting out of college right now can't afford to live. I mean, they're all living in our houses because a condo costs $400,000. Why does a condo cost $400,000? And it's absolutely insane. I think the cities have a lot of problem to do with this because they're only zoning high density housing in expensive parts of the area where the land itself is expensive. And if the land is expensive, that's got to go down to the buyer, right? And it makes it affordable. They're not putting high density housing out in rural areas where land costs are cheaper to where the house can be cheaper. And they're not making sure that the developers are making a profit, but also not putting the price out there so outlandish that we price a lot of people out of the market. And that's the whole problem we're having right now, is we're pricing most of the people out of the market. And I get we're living between a mountain range and a lake, or we're down Salt Lake City between a mountain range and a mountain range. There's only so much land in Utah, until you start having to go the long drive around the other side of these mountain ranges. But there's still enough land out there that we should be getting pricing down to where people can actually afford to live in this state.
Yeah, and so your point is that the commissioners should work with the cities. You're exactly right. It's their responsibility. And part of that is what the mandates have been pushed down to us from the state, right? And what has to be done. And then they withhold money if you don't follow along with that. So back to those mandates is that the cities need to band together and the other counties to be able to go and maybe push back against some of these mandates that are out there. but you got to do it as a consortium. And so that's what we can bring to the table, is building some consortiums with these people instead of individually going forward. So there's some other solutions, and I'll just throw this out as an idea, right? Is that I remember when I built my first house, I couldn't afford it. So I went to the builder and I said, sir, can I do a lot of the work? Fortunately, I had carpentry experience for a number of years. He allowed me to do a lot of the framing. I didn't do the trusses because I was a one-man band, right? So I did a lot of the flooring and all the external stuff and painting and all those things. Well, those are things that brought the cost down. Part of our challenge today is a lot of our young people don't have those skill sets. So what I'm proposing is that we have, and Susan talked about this a moment ago, is that so we have the 60 and older generation that's the fastest growing population. Well, a lot of those guys are heating and ventilation guys and plumbers, and they're carpenters, and they're painters, and there's this. Why can't we bring them in, have them help these young kids, and teach them how to do some of this stuff, and they would be happy to do it. It gives them purpose. They're retired. Gives them purpose, allows the kids to work together and learn a skill set.
A lifelong skill.
It drops the cost of a house. So there are, I'm not saying that's exactly the solution, but there are solutions out there that you have to stand back and look and say, what is the art of the possible and how does it impact the overall system? And then let's look at how we can do that as opposed to just accepting the way things are.
Yeah. Well, let's have a fun conversation. I've been waiting for this kind of conversation to have this kind of conversation kind of late because it's very controversial right now all over the news, and it happens to do with our neighbors to the north. So we have a massive 40,000 acre data center that they're looking at moving up into Box Elder County. And I'm going to state my opinion on this thing right out the gate so everybody knows my opinion. Then let's get into what you as commissioners, what your decisions would have made in comparison to what those commissioners up there decisions have been, because it's an honest discussion, right? As commissioners, you need to consider these things. As far as the data center is concerned, I am all for the data center. I completely support the idea of bringing those data centers. I think it'll be great for the Utah economy. I think it'll be great for our infrastructure. I think it'll be great for what importance that brings to the state of to this state. As far as how much land they're taking, it's their land. I mean, I completely believe in if it's your property, you can do whatever you want to do with that property as long as it's not damaging the area. The two areas I think is most controversial is water and power, right? That's where the people come up with most uprising. As far as water, the vast majority of data centers nowadays don't consume that much water anymore. They figured out how to cool them without so much water consumption. And so that definitely needs to have a significant more transparency on exactly how much water will you be consuming, because this state has already got really, really severe water problems, particularly with how abysmal this last winter was. So that's, I'm not against the data center or the land, but water definitely needs to be looked at, because even though they use less doesn't mean they use none. And
I
as
think
far
the
as
system is air cooled.
air cooled, yeah. And if it's air cooled, then the people don't have to complain. As far as the power is concerned, zero power should be transferred to the population anyway. So, I mean, I don't even know why that's even a question. I mean, create your own power plant out there and do your own power. I mean, just create your own power out there. That should be simple. It should be fanned out and spread out. And I don't know what power plant or what power company would consciously just fan out the expenses and distribute amongst the entire populace. I mean, that's not right at all. So that's my opinion on it is create your own power plant, consume your own power. I don't care if it's 3 times the amount of power the entire state uses. If you're producing your own power, it's not my problem, right? If it's not going onto the pocketbooks of the people, not my problem. It's going to work good for the state. But as we've been saying from the very beginning of this thing, transparency is everything, and there was a pretty significant lack of transparency up there because people had no idea what was going on. So let's have the three of you put yourselves in their position of these commissioners up in Box Elder County. We'll start with you.
Go down
start
the
with
line.
me.
I love
Go down the line here.
So
What would you have done differently?
Well, I think you hit on the key, which is transparency. So the first thing that should have been done is that the full data set that's out there should be looked at, because there are always unintended consequences. So you talked about the power, you talked about land use. You talked, but we need to look at what's the environmental impact, and what is the impact to the community? Do the house prices raise now in Box Elder County that are not affordable anymore? What does it do there? So there's so many unintended consequences that people don't look at.
Do we not know any of that data yet?
So I haven't seen it, and so that's back to your whole point of transparency, which I agree 100% with. So the difference should have been around transparency. It should have been having a citizen committee, for example, go through the data and assess what they are. Is it air cooled? Is it water cooled? There's going to be some water. What's the impact of that water? How does it, is it contaminated? Is it not contaminated? I don't have the answer to all these questions that you're asking me the question for, but I do know that if you evaluate the information and the data, then usually when you have good information, you make good decisions. And the problem is with transparency.
Public.
And when the data is public, then then people can look at it and ask questions around it and go forward. And that's really what I'm about, is putting that transparency out there and making sure that the people can look at it. They can look at the data. They should ask hard questions. I encourage hard questions. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had this joy, but I sit in a room with 50 engineers and you have 50 opinions. So, and then you got to bring them all together. I mean, it's a hard job, right? But that's what we've got to do, is because there'll be a million questions and we have to be able to answer them. So we shouldn't move quickly to a solution. We should have public hearings. So we should have the information out there in a transparent fashion, and then a good decision can be made. My concern is like yours, what you stated, which is things were made and decisions were talked about behind closed doors without it being public. And that's the problem with what we're at now. So whether it's good or it's bad, it will be based on what the information that comes forward with.
Susan?
Yeah, so when I heard about this, the first thought that came into my mind, I like to use comparisons. So we are a state that has oil refineries, and we are surrounded by states that don't, but they benefit from our oil refineries. And how much do we get from that? Well, we gave them tax breaks to build their oil refineries here, and so we are subsidizing, or I don't know if you call it subsidizing, but we help make sure that those oil refineries are built in our state. And we're not willing to, like with Idaho, we had a little fight with them because we finally said, okay, we're not going to let you get this oil or this refined gas or oil anyway, unless you actually pay us for this, because we think we should get some benefit from this. Okay, so are we building these big, huge data centers for surrounding states, or is it just for Utah? And that is something that I thought, if we had
My whole assumption is that we were building it for almost the entire western United States. Yeah. And like you're saying,
what benefit?
The benefit should be obvious. Utah, the only reason to build it here is we, the people, the taxpayers, we get a benefit out of it. There's some kind of income generation from there that benefits everybody, right? Or else why do it?
Right. So then I looked at, they said, they're going to be bringing lots of jobs. Well, that's great, but in this day and age, lots of jobs doesn't always mean from Utah people.
Well, that's not always true either, because with the data centers, you might bring a lot of construction jobs to get it built. Right. But after that, it's just maintenance, and it's like a skeleton crew.
Yes.
And so it's not going to be a lot of jobs, and no one should be looking at it as a big old job or anything, but there should still be a considerable amount of benefit coming from other states because we have it here.
Right. But my whole point was a lot of jobs, a lot of times it means that they're going to be workers that are going to be brought in on visas or whatever. They're not going to be Utah workers. And that's happened time and time again. So I would say if we're going to do it, we should put in the contract, they need to first look at the local citizens to fill those jobs before we start looking out to fill in with other people. I think that's should be included in part of it. So
well, I think one of the reasons why they are building in Utah is because Utah's Silicon Slopes, right? We are one of the states in the West that has the most technical background amongst our citizenry. I mean, that we're we're the slopes, right? We're Silicon Valley of the West, which is a big reason why they're building here. So should have the expertise already within state that should be able to
I
offer the manpower to those facilities.
Yeah, I agree. But you know, if they would have been more open about it, and then we could have had discussions with many people that could have possibly have given a lot of input that would have been helpful. And we need to look at these kind of projects as, let's see how it can best influence our communities and those that surrounding the best possible way possible. Because I'm like you, we need the data centers. The amount of information we get from technology is only growing and increasing, and we have to.
It needs to go somewhere.
It needs to go
so
somewhere.
we can see benefit from
So
it.
we do need a benefit for it. But if they're going to build them in our communities, what are we doing to make sure we best benefit our surrounding communities from that? Because they're going to be the ones most impacted by it. So, you know, the way they went about it and how they pushed it through so quickly, they didn't sell it to the communities, which they should have done before they did everything. And they could have.
I agree with that completely. The state as a whole should have some kind of a tax base coming from that, because it's benefiting the entire Western United States. So there should be some type of extra statewide tax benefit, not just to Box Elder County, but some type of benefit that we're getting supplemental income from that somehow.
Yeah.
And then there's just the water and power questions, right? How are you generating that?
Yeah, and I guess you could look at, I mean, this is really stretching the idea of benefiting, but I know, like, in Alaska, you know, when we bought Alaska and that became the U.S., the natives there were benefited by payments that they received because of that.
Mm-hmm.
They got a benefit from that, and it's an ongoing benefit. And so why don't we look at that anymore when we take
everybody in Alaska still gets those benefits
Get them.
because we get mass amounts of oil, and the oil gets distributed amongst
And you don't have to be a native. You move there, you get paid to live.
Yeah.
You get paid to live there.
So anyway.
So if we're going to bring all these data centers into Utah, not just Box Elder, but
I
we
like
can look at the Western I-80 corridor. They're probably building more data centers out there. They're looking down in Saratoga Springs to build more data centers down there, which I don't think is a great spot for them, but we have the NSA facility down there as well already. Where's the overall benefit that...
That's right. I mean, those three commissioners up there would have had every citizen on board if they would have said, you know what, we're going to make this a benefit in our community, and we're going to fight for you to make sure if it's going to come here, that we're going to create it in such a way that it helps us and not hurt them.
Exactly. Should have worked with the state on that one, right, John?
So, you know, I'm friends with every one of those three commissioners, and I think they're great guys. I really like them. And I think it's tough when you have sleepy little commission meetings. A lot of our commission meetings don't even have public comment. So a lot of, I think that they didn't realize what a tiger they had by the tail with that first meeting. And they tabled the item 1 week, and then they had a bigger venue and everything, and it was a raucous meeting. I really
bring
do.
a good point, though. Is part of the fault on the citizens who don't want to be involved until there's something they care about, and then suddenly we're in a big uproar when you've already taught them. The precedent is we don't care.
I do have some understanding for those commissioners because, as I understand it, the information was dropped on the commissioners kind of late in the game too.
Oh.
So, you know, I think that they were, they heard about it after, but I think they did the best they could with what they had. I've talked to some subject matter experts on these data centers, and I also serve on the Great Salt Lake Advisory Board. You know, and we meet quarterly and talk about the health of the Great Salt Lake and that. And there are a lot of unanswered questions still about this data center. And the commissioners up there, they were joking with me, and they're like, you know, Crofts, all of our protesters came from Davis County. And they were just kind of giving me a hard time. But there actually were a lot of protesters that were from Davis County that went. Now, in fairness, you know, MIDA, who, you know, that falls under, we do have, there's a board of director, you know, they have a board that sits on MIDA, and we have 3 elected officials in Davis County that sits on that board, and then 1 unelected official that sits on that board. So Davis County did have a right to have our people go up there and, give
But that's
feedback
the
to-
reason Kevin, whatever his name is, the investor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why he was accusing, saying they bust those people in, and you had all these people coming in. I live here, I went, but okay, Kevin, you're off the hook. You had a point.
I
but-
think a lot of them were Utahns. In fact, I looked through the crowd and I actually recognized some people that I know that were from Davis County. But so the commissioners were correct by saying that we have Davis County people that were there. But there's just it has to be transparent. Just going back to the homeless shelter, when you try to sneak things through and the public doesn't have buy-in, that's not a good thing. So I feel badly for the commissioners up there. I do think that they got beat up pretty severely over that. And, it makes me feel badly for them because I like them. And I think they're basically good people that want to do the right thing. But boy, I'll tell you, it's been a firestorm of controversy up there.
Were you up there when they got up and walked out, and what happened there?
I was not there at any of their meetings. No. I watched it on the news and watched it on YouTube. So
Yeah, the news didn't do a very good job of covering the before-math of what
when they went
happened.
to the private room and
People started screaming out epithets at them and screaming at them, and then they finally just got up and walked out, right? And they just ended the meeting and left.
they couldn't hear, I guess. So I can
I think it
understand
was-
why they.
I think it was more than they just couldn't hear. I think they're getting F-bombed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't talk because people just kept screaming over the top of them, which is not how the public should be acting. But then the news media skewed it that the commissioners were in the wrong for getting up and ending the meeting and walking out because they didn't want to answer questions. I mean, that got skewed completely wrong. So I can feel for the commissioners up there too, because I could read into that very, very quickly. I'm like, we had some rowdy people in there.
You can't conduct business.
You
that
can't
way.
conduct business the way that they were acting. So
And as elected officials, you do have to have a little bit of a thick skin sometimes. I've been yelled at, and I think it's okay. I think that I would rather have people yelling at me. I would rather have people swearing at me than not have any engagement at all. And I do think that that's a good thing. So, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. Well, actually, a lot of times when you're getting sworn at and yelled at, it's uncomfortable. But I think that there's an advantage to that. And I've been booed before. And you know what? When I got booed, I became better for it because I saw some truth in that. And I think as elected officials, we have to have a little bit of a thick skin, and we all have our turnout, and I grew up with 5 sisters too. So that praised me for it. And
6 mothers.
I had a bunch of family that helped prepare me for it. And by the way, today they're my best friends, and I have a little brother too. He's the favorite of our family, and he claims that he's the favorite of our parents, but he's also all of our favorite too. But I'll tell you, it's good to be able to take criticism and feedback, and it's good to be booed.
And I can say that is one of the major reasons I chose not to collect signatures, because I think that is the first test of, can you take it? Can you take it? I had to go out. I had to meet with the people. I had to earn their vote. I had to be not afraid of it. And I think when you allow signature gatherers to get on the ballot, it's like their safety net.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what the commissioners did. It's like leaving the room. They don't have to listen. They're already there. And I know Scott was in the same boat. He went the convention route only. That is how we prove to all the people we're willing to listen. That's our first test.
I love that.
well, I can't stand SB 54, and we've been,
But take the
bad
money out
mouthing
of it.
Yeah, we've been trying to get rid of SB 54 since we started this podcast, but we went up to and interviewed state senators for that very reason, asked them specific questions about SB 54 and trying to get down to the bottom of that. But yeah, we do not have the votes up there in the legislature to get rid of that right now. So that's what we're dealing with, with the
Because
Senate.
it's their safety net.
Yeah, got to get rid of the safety net. And it's corrupting the state. It's absolutely corrupting the state. Well, let's do this. Let's have you guys kind of give your final little stump speak what you want your audience to hear, and we'll start with you, Susan, and you can address your audience directly right there at that.
Thank you. So first of all, I want everyone to know that I'm running because I want to represent you. More than anything, I've been able to serve on the Kaysville City Council, as I've stated throughout this podcast, and I learned firsthand what it takes to be a representative of the people. And if given that opportunity again, I will be that representative. And I know I don't live in a bubble. I know that there's opposing views than what I believe in, but I am somebody who is open, and I will listen, because I know it takes many people to come to a decision. And I believe it's important to listen to all those other views out there and to represent all the people and to do the best job that I can to do that. But with that being said, I also know there's a spending problem, and I'm willing to dig in and to make those choices that we need to make sure that we get rid of that spending problem so that we can take care of the people. I had a brother-in-law who worked for a big company. He was 55 years old, and he got laid off. And yes, it was extremely hard, but I think, if those kind of decisions can be made in the private sector, we in the government sector also should stand to those same values. And we should be making those tough choices so that we're taking care of that largest segment of our population, 60 and older, because we need to really, really make sure that we're not pushing them out of their homes, which is what is happening. And so we need to take care of that segment. But with that being said, I promise I will listen. I will also be accountable. I will be transparent, and I want to serve you. And so I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
My turn. Good job. So I think Susan well stated on what's out there. So we've had a wide range of topics today, and so I think you have a pretty good sense of where my position is. So if I can boil it down to just a few, and Susan talked about a lot of these, is number one, being transparent. We have got to be transparent with you, the taxpayer, because it's your money. It's not our money, it's your money. We need to represent you. And that requires that you have the information necessary to help us make good decisions. And so I want to bring my 42 years of experience making decisions in the private sector as an executive and as a chief engineer and as a physicist, and using those processes that I've developed and gained incredible amount of experience, and bring those to the table. Additionally, is bringing my experience that I spent in Washington, D.C., the 11 years that I spent flying back and forth to Washington, D.C., working with the House and Senate appropriations and authorization committees, the armed services committees, and DDR&E, and the Office of Secretary of War, that's called now. And so I worked with them. I built coalitions to move things forward. And so I'm going to bring that skill set to bear in terms of building coalitions. So one thing I really want people to walk away with is the compassion that I have for the citizens of Davis County. And that compassion is evidenced by trying to do the right thing for the citizen. Susan talked about taxes. It's not compassionate to tax older people out of their homes. That's not compassionate. And so there's a direct impact on the decisions that we made from a tax base moving forward. The commissioner's responsibilities, as John has talked about, is to have the purse strings. Well, we need to use those purse strings effectively to represent the citizens of Davis County. So in summary, I want to bring my experience. I want to bring the demonstrated processes. I want to bring the tenacity, because I think it's really important to bring tenacity to the table to make things happen. I want to bring this transparency and bringing you, the citizen, into the decision process moving forward. And I commit to you now to do that and be absolutely responsible to you, the citizen, and bring you into the process moving forward. So I would also appreciate your vote, as that vote is coming very soon, and I will commit to you to be able to follow through with that and make you part of the process as opposed to decisions being made apart from you. Thank you very much.
John, do you want any final comments to the people of Davis County?
Yeah, I have to say that I do have friends that are Republicans. Most of my friends are. I also have family and friends that are Democrats. And I will say that I've talked to 2 Democrats that are going to be voting for Scott and Susan. So I think that, there's issue-based things that people care about. And when you talk about local politics, it's important. So if you are a Democrat, I would still recommend that you vote for Susan and Scott. That said, I am a little concerned sometimes with the tax and spend Democrat philosophies that's out there. And I was a little alarmed when we had the Davis County Democrats. It was a group that came out and they endorsed 3 Republicans that I don't endorse. But it was a little bit alarming to me that we actually have Democrats.
Are you going to name them?
Well, I don't know if I should name them.
I will
You're
name
welcome
them.
to, but I did. It was something that didn't set very well with me. Because I think in local politics, it's really important to elect the best people. And I strongly believe that Susan and Scott are the best people for the commission. And John Whitesides and John Atkin for sheriff as well. I think that their decisions are really going to matter. So
The Democratic Party has come out officially endorsing Kendallin, what is her last name? Harris for a county commission seat. Brian McKenzie, who is the incumbent as city clerk or county clerk, sorry. And who's the third one? Lorraine Kamalu. So if you are of conservative values, what does that tell you right there when they would actively come out and endorse those people? Please take that under consideration. If you like those people, great. Go to lunch with them, go on vacation with them, have them over Friday night. I'm not saying these are horrible people. They are just not the right ones for Davis County.
And thank you.
Well, we are grateful that you guys spent the time with us. It's been fun. This is going to come out and hopefully sway a lot of voters to make sure that they're getting conservative values back into our county. We do not want anything in this state to go liberal at all. If you guys are out there and have anybody else you would recommend being on our podcast, any other elected officials, I don't care where you are in the state or even if you're up in Idaho areas or other areas in the country, let us know. Like, subscribe, share, drop us a comment. Let us know who you'd like to have on the podcast. Please look down below and buy our merchandise. We got lots of shirts and stuff like down there. We'd love to have you support. Again, remember, this coming Friday, 6:30 Morgan County Building, Phil Lyman, T.R. Auxier, Tina Cannon, as well as Braden Hess will be here. So come out and enjoy that conversation, and we will see everybody on our next video.